now we can talk about Traitors. Love the Park Banishment. She was always going. It's just a matter of when. I mean, it was a spicy roundtable. I feel like you don't often see the faithful managing to be debating between the two traitors. And this is exactly why they should have voted out Trishelle. Murdered Trishelle. Because I think they knew that she had this theory. And if they'd gotten Trishelle out, Phaedra wouldn't have been on the radar at all. Like, they thought murdering Bergie was the thing that was going to keep the scent off Phaedra, but that didn't work. This is the second time all the votes went to Traitors. Dan ruined the game for the Traitors. Oh, because everybody voted for Dan except... Oh, and Dan voted for Phaedra, and Peter voted for Parv at that vote. Yeah, but that was less like they're debating between the two people, and there were like 2 rogue votes in a otherwise unanimous vote for Dan, and obviously Dan couldn't vote for himself. This felt more contentious in some ways. Yeah, Dan did really fuck shit up for his compatriots. And not in a malicious way, I don't think. It's just what happened. He was doing what he needed to try to do to save himself, and that was at the expense of the people who are still in the game. And now that's their problem to deal with. It'll be interesting bringing Kate in to see if Phaedra ends up going at the next roundtable anyway. And then if Kate is suddenly the sole traitor and has to blackmail somebody, that would be wild. You kind of want Bravo in their extensions to make Final Six if you have to cut Sheree. I mean, Sheree's not on the show. MJ's not on the show. John is just barely on the show. Kevin is just barely on the show. I feel like John and Kevin almost never get confessionals, but you see them talking with other people. Whereas, like, I feel like you don't ever see Sheree or MJ talking to anyone or doing anything. MJ has the meme, though. She can stay. I mean, sure. I want to see Sandra do well. I'm frustrated after last week she explained the whole, well, it wasn't just this, it was also, I know Parv's a traitor, so I want to keep her while we have the numbers, and then we'll deal with them, and then we'll still be able to get her out later. To all of a sudden turn that around and vote for Parv last night felt a little ridiculous. But yes, it was a ticking clock with Parvati. That's not a surprise. There was no world at this point where she was making it to the end. And it's not looking great for Phaedra at this point either, but we'll see. The puppy woke up. The producers of Traitors have stated they don't want to edit the show as a strategy show. They want it to be a murder mystery, so Sandra's gaming content will be cut. Yeah, I mean, it was a miracle, it seems like, that we got the billiards, like, description that we got, and obviously we got a very cut-down version of it compared to what Sandra was saying on Instagram. But, like, it's hard for it not to be strategy when you have a faction of people that won't work with anybody else. So that, by default, creates a second faction, and then you are strategizing in tribes against each other, instead of it being the faithful trying to solve the mystery of who's the traitors. It has very much become a, we need to get them out so that we can keep our numbers so that we get to the end. And in the meantime, we can figure out the traitors, but if you're not at the end, it doesn't matter if you know who the traitors are or not. Also, if you don't want it to be a strategy show, don't put on a bunch of people from strategic reality competition shows. Because that's their forte, and that's what they're going to do. that's just my opinion. The novelty of the Traitors is wearing off on you. The format is just so broken and unbalanced that you don't enjoy watching it as much now. I enjoy the drama of the people, and the campiness of it, but I don't think it's as interesting to dissect strategically as like Survivor is, for instance. Because yeah, the mechanics are so inflexible in a lot of ways, and as an identity, the Traitors have such an inherent advantage. Because particularly early on, you're just shooting in the dark. The first half of the season is just completely pointless. Yeah, it might be better if they started with less people. It's hard, though, because they're, most weeks getting rid of 2 people per episode. So in order to make, a 10 or 12 episode long season, you got to have enough people to fill that out. Because you also, as we saw with the torch situation last week, you lose so much momentum if nobody goes home. Especially if the producers aren't going to openly acknowledge the meta strategy of Traitors and Faithful wanting to keep each other to stay safe. Yeah, like that's a good thing. The game can't just be vote out the Traitors when the Traitors, respawn at every opportunity. And as I think Puya said on the podcast, not every Faithful can go to the end. You have to get out some Faithfuls along the way. That's part of it. So, you have to acknowledge that that's the nature of the game. It's not a bug, it's a feature. I mean, I wonder if, the way Sandra is playing the game will impact how they want to cast the show in the future. UK is also such a completely different experience because it's all strangers, all civilians, as we say. Trishelle and Peter are getting the most content because they play the game as detectives. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, they also narrate well. And clearly Peter is the center of a lot of attention from both sides for various reasons. Yeah, I don't know. Phaedra needs to make it a couple more days to be good, but I think she's not long for this world. Even if there are 3 or 4 people who will not vote for her, that's not enough yet. So we'll see what happens there. But I can't wait for Kate the Traitor. I'm so excited. You do think Phaedra and Kate need to murder Sheree or MJ as their last kill? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't benefit them to murder either of them any sooner than that when they're part of their numbers. I really hope the producers adjust things like the whole Traitors basically never come in last except for a twist. Oh, in terms of who comes in at breakfast, that's something I've always thought about is don't you realize if you're coming in at the end, if you're one of the last people coming to breakfast, that means you were an option to go home. You have to realize that. We know for sure people this season were aware of that. Yeah. It's arbitrary at the beginning, but who the last 2 people who come in is you are allowing players to use production as strategy. Yeah. It would be different if, they could cut them, they could have them all come in that way. Or, they can show it to us on TV that way. But have them come in a different order in the room. And then just show us them opening the doors in the order you want for it to be the most suspenseful. I know you'll lose some of the reactions at the table, but those are all the same. Everybody just claps and is excited, and then they're sad about whoever doesn't come through the door. But, you know, if you can use production as strategy, you got to do it. It would be foolish not to while it's available to you. Not only does it tell you who might be a traitor, but who is being considered for murder. In terms of the traitors never come in last, is that what you mean? The people that get discussed as options for murder always show up last. Yeah, no, I know that. But if you have 20 people coming in the door, that doesn't help you know who a traitor is, other than that they're not coming in last. But that's not narrowing down your field a whole lot until way later in the game, as we've already discussed. A lot of what happens with the first 10 people who go is not ultimately relevant to the end game at all. So if you look at the last couple to come through, you know who the traitor's considered, and eventually who is yeah, I guess if you got like really observant and made yourself like a table with everybody's name and what order they came into breakfast each day, you could start to see the people who are never last, and that might tell you something. But that requires a lot of attention when a lot of things are going on. I think CT has a pass to Final 5 since they need him for missions. I mean, maybe. How much do these people... This is the other thing that doesn't work for me about it being a celebrity season. It's like, how much do these people care about that money? Everybody in that cabin left, because what do they care if they lose $1,000? That's no money to them. Phaedra just said you can't buy a pair of nice shoes with $500. So I think like the challenges already don't matter, and now they matter even less because these people want to play the game for the screen time, but I don't think the money is actually that big of like the prize money. They're getting an appearance fee regardless, but I don't think the prize money is actually that much of a motivating factor for reality TV people to go onto this show. Too low in general, but especially for a celebrity season. I mean, what does Sandra care about $1,000 when she's won $1 million twice on Survivor? And all these housewives have tons of money. Like, I don't know that anybody on this show sees $200,000 as a lot of money. They care about their future TV appearances. Exactly. So it's not about the money, which means the missions don't matter. Outside of getting shields, I guess, if that's something that you care, if you're Trishelle, if that's something you really care about. But like, it's so hard for the missions to matter to begin with because they're all working together and nobody's working in opposition to one another outside of the, you know, occasional choice to go get a shield or not. And I think it helps when they're out in the open and you have to choose to like be seen going for a shield versus when it can be secret. But I don't know. It's not my job to fix it. You think the missions should be exclusively about shields and just give them the pot of money from the beginning? You prefer the secret shields because they can lead to failed murders. I think it's good to have a mix of both. I think if they're always secret, it can often lead to a whole group of people being safe if they were part of a group that could have gotten the shield. But in general, I do at least think it's better to do it this way, even if it's secret, doing it in the missions rather than you have an opportunity to go to the armory to get a shield, which was always just a slow 5 minutes of television or whatever. So that was improved. And what I've heard from the podcast is that production is receptive to what people are saying about what does and doesn't work on the show. So I hope that it continues to get better. I also like the idea they did in Australia season 1 where shields protect you from both murder and banishment, so everyone is motivated to get them. I think that's good, but I think then that also just is another factor in the favor of the traitors. Because they have all the more reason to be acting even more like faithfuls in the missions. Like, it needs to be... There need to be opportunities for it to be more obvious that the traitors are working against the faithful, the way that it is in the mole. Because something that I always find really interesting about the mole format is that, yes, the mole has to do their job and they want to obscure their behavior, but then other people want to appear slightly mole-like to gain incorrect suspicion on themselves so people get the quiz wrong. If the traitors added in a quiz factor somehow, I think that could be interesting. And like, if how well or how poorly you do on a quiz impacts your like advantage or disadvantage in the game in some way, that could help. I think traitors should not be able to win shields if they protect against banishment. Yeah, that's just again, like, in addition to it being another thing that will make traitors act more like faithfuls because they have a reason to, the same way that they have a reason to want to get the money in the pot when they're working together in challenges. If you can't banish a traitor at the round table, what are you going to do? Then all you can do is vote out a faithful. And that's not fair to the faithful. Like, when you've taken away the possibility for the faithful to do the one thing they have to do, I don't think your game works. So you heard it here first. I said add quizzes to the traitors. I don't know. I don't mean that super seriously, but I just think there has to be benefits to traitor-like behavior. And right now, there's not. There's not benefits to traitor-like behavior for the traitors or for the faithful. And so it's just so difficult unless you get a batch of bad traitors or one bad traitor who messes it up for everybody else. It's so difficult to suss out who the traitors are. Faithful are at such a they're at a numerical advantage, but it's such a statistical disadvantage. You also think there should be some element of gaining information about the traitors from the challenges too. Yeah, they talked about this on the pod at one point also. The idea that, like, maybe if you even just got a confirmation of how many traitors there are at certain points during the game, and then you get to choose if you want to share that information with other people or not. Or you force people to choose protection from banishment or murder. If you choose banishment, then you heighten suspicions on you. That's a little more interesting and maybe a little more fair, because I think that's right. Because that does put more suspicion on you. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. But at the same time, I think there are certainly some faithful who would, like, no. Everybody knows I'm faithful, so I'm never going to get banished, so I'm going to protect myself from murder. And I think up until, like, 2 roundtables ago, Phaedra could have been one of those people. So it's interesting. There are lots of things that I really do like about the traitors, and then there are certainly some things that don't quite work as far as game mechanics go. But it's fun TV. These people are ridiculous. And I'm very excited to see Traitor Kate next week. Some missions would be earn shields, and then say 1 out of every 3 missions would be gaining some kind of info on traitors. Yeah, it definitely could be interesting. Or, like, you know, do you want the $1,000 or do you want information on the traitors? It's like a Survivor, you know, like, dilemma where you have to choose. Do you want an advantage or do you want food? You want money or you want information? Yeah, more things to switch it up, I think, are interesting. But, so the one challenge I did really like this season, and they did this on the UK also, is the poison chalice funeral situation. Because it does put the traitors in a kind of tricky spot, which I think is interesting and should happen more often in terms of having to answer incorrectly when you know the answer so that you don't appear like you know the answer, even at the cost of money to the pot. They do seem receptive to feedback, so that makes you hopeful. Yeah. More things like the chalice because it forces them to do something obvious. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. It's so difficult to figure out the murder when it happens. I mean, off camera, essentially. They're in one corner and they do a thing, and then somebody gets called into a room and they get told to go home. You have nothing to work with. You think we're heading for a faithful win? I do too. If the traitor wins, it's Kate by herself or her and her recruit if needed. I think I think Kate goes to the end, and then she'll recruit somebody because Phaedra's gonna be out of here pretty soon. But then I wouldn't be surprised if Kate manages to get rid of the other traitor at the right moment to then be safe at the end and get the money. But it sure does feel like it's going to be a faithful win at this point, because there are some good gamers in the house who are paying attention and have good reads about what's going on. Muse, you and your spoilers. Well, this was a fun brainstorming session on how to fix the Traitors. A show I really enjoy. That's what I've always said about Survivor when it seems like, Jeff and company are so mad that people don't like stuff. And it's like, well, we want to make it better because we care about it. If you didn't care, you wouldn't have any opinions on what works and what doesn't. You only bother trying to improve things that you care about. Gotta go do puppy stuff. Enjoyed the discussion. Thanks for stopping by, Muse. Have fun with the puppy. Cosmo had a great time in the snow today, which I didn't think she would. Last year, the one opportunity she had to be in, she didn't like being in snow when it was snowing, and then liked running around in it on the ground. But today we had enough that it was up to her belly at points when we were walking. But she was actively choosing to jump in it. So that was very cute. All right, let's persona it up.